two of the most powerful nations on Earth, just drew a line in the US-Israeli war against Iran. China told Washington and Israel to immediately cease all military operations against Iran. Hours later, Russia said it would do everything to make those operations impossible, not slow them down. These are not fringe countries issuing strongly worded statements from the sidelines. These are two permanent members of the UN Security Council, both nuclear-armed and have deep military ties to Tehran. That is not diplomatic noise. Instead, it is the clearest signal yet that this conflict is no longer just a Middle East war. At a press briefing in Beijing, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning laid out her government's position without any ambiguity. China opposes US and Israeli military actions against Iran as violations of international law, she said, and supports Iran in safeguarding its sovereignty, security, territorial integrity, and national dignity. She urged all relevant parties to immediately stop military operations and avoid further escalation. Relevant parties, in Beijing's diplomatic shorthand, means Washington and Tel Aviv, and not Tehran. When a reporter pressed her on the apparent double standard between China's position on Iran and its position on Ukraine, Mao pushed back hard, saying it is China's consistent position to resolve disputes through dialogue, not through the arbitrary use of force. Whether that consistency actually holds up is a question Beijing would prefer not to answer in specific detail. Russia was less careful with its phrasing. Foreign Minister Lavrov addressed an ambassadors' roundtable in Moscow and went considerably further than anything Beijing said. According to him, Russia will do everything to create an atmosphere that would make American and Israeli operations against Iran impossible. He had already described the conflict as unprovoked armed aggression, but on this occasion he went further and speculated about Washington's strategic objectives, saying he had no doubt that one of the goals of Operation Epic Fury was to divide the countries of the Persian Gulf and drive a wedge between Iran and its Arab neighbors. He also accused Washington of manufacturing the pretext for the war by falsely claiming Iran refused a nuclear deal, saying the United States was just playing a trick and used the excuse to launch an attack. Then he made an argument that cuts to the bone of the entire conflict. He warned that this war would accelerate nuclear proliferation globally, saying there are more and more examples proving that if you have no nuclear weapon, you can be treated as one chooses. Behind the public statements, the actual support flowing to Iran tells an even more consequential story. 6 American service members were killed in Kuwait when an Iranian drone found them in the dark at a makeshift facility with a precision that had nothing to do with luck. US defense officials knew it, and on March 18th, CIA Director John Ratcliffe sat before the Senate Intelligence Committee and confirmed that Iran has been requesting intelligence assistance from Russia, China, and other US adversaries. When pressed on whether those countries were actually delivering it, Ratcliffe said he knew the answer and was prepared to discuss it in the classified portion of the hearing. Senator Angus King described that non-answer as a first cousin of a yes. Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, meanwhile, told reporters that Putin had personally assured the president Russia was not sharing intelligence with Iran. So, on one side, you have the CIA director implying yes, and on the other, you have the White House taking Putin at his word. In the same week that an Iranian drone killed 6 Americans with suspicious accuracy. What Moscow has been providing is real-time intelligence on the locations and movements of American troops, warships, and aircraft across the Middle East, delivered through a surveillance satellite transferred to Iranian operational use under the name Qayyam. Iran's own reconnaissance satellites cannot reliably track fast-moving naval assets across open water, but Russia's can, and without that feed, Iran would be operating with a significantly larger blind spot than it currently has. In a war where knowing where American carrier groups are positioned is the difference between a missile that finds its target and one that does not, that advantage is not marginal. China's contribution runs through different channels, but in some respects reaches even deeper, because Beijing built its role into Iran's military infrastructure years before the first missile was fired. China supplied Iran with the YLC-8B anti-stealth radar, a system designed specifically to reduce the effectiveness of the coatings that make American stealth aircraft difficult to detect. The 35 was engineered to be invisible to conventional radar systems, and against a YLC-8B, it is considerably less so, which is part of why the emergency landing of a US F-35 on March 19th drew the level of concern from Pentagon officials that it did. China also transitioned Iran's military navigation off American GPS and onto its own Beidou 3 satellite network. which means Washington cannot interfere with the signals guiding Iranian missiles the way it otherwise could. And Reuters reported that Iran is now finalizing a deal for 50 Chinese CM-302 supersonic anti-ship missiles capable of traveling at Mach 3, weapons that military analysts describe as carrier killers, with the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald R. Ford both currently operating within their engagement range. Then there is the Strait of Hormuz, and this is where China's position in this war becomes impossible to read as simple neutrality. Iran has reportedly decided that only Chinese vessels will be allowed to pass through the strait, describing the arrangement as a gesture of gratitude toward Beijing for its stance during the war. An IIGC official claimed Iranian forces now fully control the waterway and warned that any vessel attempting to pass without authorization risks being struck by missiles or drones. Roughly 200 crude oil and product tankers are currently stranded in the Gulf. Marine insurance premiums across the region have surged, and ship movements through the strait have slowed to a fraction of their pre-war volume. China is the largest buyer of Iranian oil on Earth, and most of those supplies pass through Hormuz, which means the exclusive passage arrangement directly protects Beijing's energy supply chain, while every other importing nation scrambles for alternatives. Beijing is simultaneously calling for peace at every UN podium it can find and operating as the only major economy whose tankers are still moving through the waterway at the center of the global crisis. Mao Ning's call for an immediate ceasefire reads very differently when China is the only country whose ships are still allowed through. The contradiction is not accidental. It is the strategy. At the UN Security Council, the alignment between Moscow and Beijing became fully formal when the Council voted on a resolution condemning Iran's missile and drone attacks on Gulf states. Both China and Russia abstained. Russia then introduced a competing draft resolution demanding a ceasefire from all parties, and the United States vetoed it. The four countries that voted in favor were China, Russia, Pakistan, and Somalia. The language between Moscow and Beijing differs, with China positioning itself as a peacemaker and Russia positioning itself as a counterweight, but the alignment does not differ. Both are backing Tehran. Both are blocking Washington. And both are using this crisis to challenge the United States' ability to set the terms of a war it launched without any Security Council authorization. Neither Russia nor China has committed troops to this conflict, and neither has fired directly at American or Israeli forces. Both have stayed carefully enough below that threshold to avoid forcing Washington into a confrontation with them rather than with Tehran. But Russia is supplying Iran with the coordinates of American military assets. China built the radar systems helping Iran detect aircraft designed not to be detected. China's satellite navigation is guiding Iranian missiles toward their targets. Chinese carrier-killing weapons are weeks away from Iranian launchers, and both countries are blocking every diplomatic path that would require Iran to stand down. The Strait of Hormuz is no longer just a trade route. It is a front line, and the question is no longer whether this war is disrupting the global economy. It is how deeply, how long, and who controls the choke point when it ends.